All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome. This is week 11. This is day 2 of speech and debate for this week. So on Monday, there was a sub. I had a video and you were supposed to do that quick third quarter check-in, right? Just making sure, was your third quarter grade what you wanted? Hopefully at least at a minimum passing, right? 70%. Obviously love to see an A or a B. And then how can you going into fourth quarter either continuing that really good grade, those habits, or what can you change to better your grade? Okay, which obviously the answer to that would be coming to class, getting work done, participating. All those things are going to help, and especially using class time wisely. Okay, because I really do try to give a lot of class time to get things done. And I'm giving those extended late windows, right? So instead of 1 week, I'm giving that 2 weeks. So it's extended, but using that because once it closes, then it's done. So just staying on top of those things. Okay. So you were supposed to kind of get a start on Tuesday with this week's topic, which is the 4-day work week. So this was one of the topics that we came up with. So the list we kind of narrowed down to was cancel culture, work week, literature, social media, IQ, artificial intelligence, dress code, uniforms. So we're doing 4-day work week this week. Next week, we're doing cancel culture. So I am working off the list that we kind of narrowed down, and you guys seem to have some interest, and we won't be able to get to everything, but my goal is to try to get to as much of that, or maybe I can combine a little bit. We could even talk a little bit about social media in cancel culture, right? How far should freedom of speech go on social media with cancel culture? That could be really interesting. If we're going to suspend someone's account, should it be permanently? Should it be for 6 months? Like, we could kind of integrate some social media into that so that we can get to more topics. All right, so for this week, we are looking at the 4-day work week, okay? So some really quick background, and I talked about this really quick in the video yesterday, but just for some historical perspective, how did we get to the 5-day, 40-hour work week? The standard that you and I have grown up with or heard of, you know what I mean, that is legal and this and that, hasn't always been that way. It's actually less than 100 years, okay? So Henry Ford, if you think back to, if you're in U.S. history, if you've taken U.S. history, the Industrial Revolution, one of the big parts of the Industrial Revolution was the factory and the assembly line. And Henry Ford was one of the first great examples of the assembly line, this idea of the same person doing the same job over and over. So take the skill of like building an entire car, and instead of having one person build the entire car, break it down into 20 different jobs, less skill, more labor, but by doing every person doing the same job over and over and over again, I can be producing 20 cars at a time of different stages versus one car at a time from beginning to end. That's obviously going to be a lot slower production. So Henry Ford was really big economically in setting a new standard in the United States. He also was the first to kind of get to this idea of, if I treat my employees better, they might actually work better. This was counterculture at the time. Culture at the time was you just squeeze every ounce of energy out of your workers. So the idea of setting an 8-hour workday was like unthought of. It was like, what? Because most companies, it was 10 to 12 hours. Like, that was norm. So first thing he did in 1914 to 1918 was an 8-hour workday. And the government kind of got behind this and said, okay, yeah, we're going to do an 8-hour workday. Then he decided to do something crazy. Instead of having them work 6 days a week, they're only going to work 5 days a week. Only 5 days a week. What? He became one of the most sought after companies to work for, because who doesn't want to have 2 days off every week? Now, usually everything was Monday through Saturday. Religious rates were much, much higher at that time, 100 years ago, or 80 years ago, and stuff. So almost everybody had Sundays off, okay, and stuff. So to participate in religious things or just having the day off. But 6-day work week was the norm. So he said, I actually believe if I give them more time with their family, leisure time to just decompress, recuperate, that they'll work harder for me. Now, everybody was naysayers. They're like, you are crazy. 8-hour work days, 5 days a week. Sure enough, what happened? His production levels went up. So people started to take notice. And then by 1940, we have the government implementing both, okay? 8-hour work days, 40 hours a week, 5-day work weeks as standard. Okay, now some people work more than that, but then usually you have to make overtime, or you have other parameters that would do that. So the new trend has been kind of revisiting Henry Ford's theory. If we have people work 4 days a week instead of 5, Could this be better for the employee? Could it be better for the employer? Okay. What are some of the pros and cons of that? All right. And so we're going to watch one of these videos that kind of introduces that. These graphs down here can be really helpful. This one is showing a UK study. So in the UK, they did a study. They had a bunch of companies participate for 6 months and test out the 4-day work week. And we'll look at these statistics afterwards. But I kind of listed those under cons and under pro sites or pros and con sites. Okay, so let's take a look. Before we do that, if you haven't already, go ahead and open up your worksheet. So that 4-day worksheet, so you can start filling it out. Okay, so topic of the week is going to be 4-day work week. Should we do it? And then as we're watching these videos, maybe start to lean toward a position, or maybe you want to research a little bit more. Yes, we should do it. It's better for, and to have the argument, you don't want to just do employee, you want to do employee and employer. Okay, so meaning the person, the company and the employee. So is it overall beneficial for both, or is it not? Is it better to keep the 5 days a week? Because think, if you only are working 4 days a week, that might mean that the company isn't open on Friday. So that's less customers that they might get. So you also have to think about some other aspects to it, not just from the employee perspective. You got to think about it from the outside perspective on consumers. You got to think about it from the employer. Does it benefit them? And stuff. So, all right. And then we'll watch. Let's see. How long is this one? How much is this one? Fixed burnout. Okay, let's watch the first one. All right, I think this one did a little bit better pro con on this first one. All right, here we go.
1926, Henry Ford instituted a 5-day, 40-hour work week with no loss of pay for having Saturdays off, what's now the standard in American workplaces. Now there's a push to consider a 4-day, 32-hour work week, again with no loss in pay. But how practical is that? Earlier, I spoke with Daniel Hammermesh, an economist at the University of Texas, and Joe O'Connor, who helped develop an international pilot program to test a 4-day work week. I asked O'Connor about the results of that pilot program.
A 4-day week is a good idea because we've seen in the trials that have taken place in the United States, in the United Kingdom, and elsewhere all over the world over the course of the last year, that most of the companies participating in those trials have said they plan on making the policy permanent. Their revenue has either remained stable or has increased during the trial, and they've experienced that their productivity has been able to be maintained and in many cases even improved. Unsurprisingly, we saw improvements across a whole range of different well-being indicators amongst employees that participated in the trials, but it's something that can actually be better for business too.
Daniel Hammermesh, is there a cost to this?
I think there is. I can't believe that if, in fact, this were applied universally, even fairly broadly, that we wouldn't see a substantial decline in output and a substantial resulting decline in people's incomes. If employers could do this, my question is, why haven't they done this? Everybody would win. I just don't think they can very broadly.
Joe, what do you say to that? Loss of output and loss of income.
So I would agree with Daniel that this is very much not a one-size-fits-all model. I'm not arguing that the 4-day week, 9 to 5, should become the new normal everywhere, because as we know, there are many sectors, many industries, many companies that don't have a 5-day 9 to 5. What I'm arguing is that most companies today who operate on a 5-day 9 to 5 basis could move to a 4-day week without necessarily needing to increase headcount and without necessarily damaging on their business performance, priorities, or productivity. When they attack inefficiencies like overlong and unnecessary meetings, distractions in the workday, processes that are outdated or inefficient, and poor use of technology, that they can go a long way to offering a shorter work week to their employees without undermining the bottom line.
What about Daniel's other point, that if this is such a great idea, why haven't businesses already done it?
Well, the reason why businesses haven't done it is that before the pandemic, it wasn't acceptable in society or in business, this idea that you could run a global company from your kitchen table, this idea that you could be as productive at home as you could be in the office. And it took a big game changer like the pandemic to dislodge a lot of these cultural and societal norms. I believe the same is true with the shorter working week. This has opened the eyes of leaders and of managers that there are different ways of working that are possible.
Daniel, you say it's a trade-off. Where do the benefits become so great that they outweigh the loss of productivity and the loss of income? Or do they?
It depends on people's preferences. Some people might be willing to take a, let's say, 5 or 8% cut in income to have an extra 20% of leisure time. But the point is that there are a lot of industries, as Joe would acknowledge, where this doesn't work. Manufacturing cars on an assembly line, which is the archetypal model we have, I don't see why working fewer hours is going to get any more, and I think substantially less output. One other thing to stress, though, and Joe is right, there's been a huge trend already before the pandemic toward more 4-day work. I mean, it went from 1% in 1973 to over 6% in 2018. And I fully expect it to go up. And Joe's organization fostering that, I think, is a good thing if we can do it.
Joe, there are some models in the United States where it's a compressed week. It's 4 days, but 40 hours. What do you think about that?
The difficulty I would have with that model in a lot of cases, particularly when you're talking about knowledge-based or work that used to be maybe primarily office-based, now is hybrid or remote, I'm not persuaded or convinced that people are as productive in their 9th or 10th hour on a Wednesday necessarily as they might be in their 1st or 2nd hour on a Friday. I'm also not persuaded that from a burnout perspective, that people are likely to be better rested after 4 10-hour days than they might be after 5 8-hour days. So I think the research is not conclusive that this is something that necessarily in lots of job types is good for business and good for people. And the other point I would make is that it overlooks the power of the incentive, the ability to be able to get some of their time back in exchange for the same pay, that people are incredibly focused and motivated and driven while they're at work in order to achieve the goals and the targets of the company.
Daniel, what do you say to that, especially his point about efficiency and productivity actually sort of having diminishing returns?
I think he's quite correct on that it does. On the other hand, even a 10-hour day, the 9th and 10th hours, people are not doing nothing. So I think this would keep up almost the output we now have. But the crucial point to note is that people like bunching leisure. In some industries, it's been very successful. In medical hospitals, for 12-hour days, 3 days a week. That's a full time. And that bunches very well, it accords very well with the demands of clients not to have the patient shifted from one nurse or one doctor to the next 3 times a day. So I think all of this depends on what is appropriate. I doubt there are that many industries where, in fact, 4 days, 8 hours a day will leave us as well off.
Daniel Hammermesh of the University of Texas and Joe O'Connor of the Work Time Reduction Center of Excellence. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
So some interesting points made in a couple different perspectives, not just saying 40 or not just saying 4-day work week. What do we think really quick of the idea of, do you think it's fair to go to 4 8s instead of 5 8s, or do you think going from 5 8s to 4 10s? So like, for example, my husband works for the city of Henderson. So he works 4 days a week, but he works 4 10s. So he works the same number of hours in just less days. Or nursing, that's a really good example, where they do 3 12s is really common, and that's considered full-time, versus shorter shifts, more days. So you're still working hour for the pay, where some people are saying you should actually do less hours but get the same pay. And so it's another element to the argument that is interesting. Which way in general are you guys leaning? Do you think in general going to the 4-day work week, or do you think there's just too many variables possibly? Obviously, some industries it's not going to work. Let's list some industries where we don't think it would work. What industries would reducing the days not work? What do you think? Could go ahead.
Contracting.
Yeah, contracting, that could be a problem, like building.
Yeah.
Especially because you have to kind of work with daylight hours. So having a 12-hour day isn't necessarily, and it's very physical too.
Yeah.
So that might not be practical.
Medical field.
Pardon? Medical field. So they're actually saying, so this is interesting. Medical field, I agree with you. It wouldn't work if you're open less days. But let's say the hospital's open 7 days a week. You just have the employees work longer hours, which they already do. Hospitals are actually an example of already doing that, working shorter, less days, but longer hours. Anybody food service industry? Think about like a restaurant. Can a restaurant really afford to only be open 4 days a week? Would
Not
you?
really, no.
Do you know what I mean? I don't
Yeah.
know.
And I think it's hard enough to like already make a living, you know?
Yeah.
And like with me having parents that are waiters and a waiter and a waitress, like that's their entire job. So if
Right.
they got less days than what they have now,
It's
they
less
can,
opportunities for tips,
Yeah,
right? Especially in
exactly,
the
yeah.
service industry, you need, and the reality is maybe you can work the longer shift, but there are prime times for eating, right? So even
Yeah.
if I could work from noon to midnight, are people really coming in at 10, 11 o'clock and eating, you know, like, right? You know, or that afternoon where it slows
Yeah.
down. You're
Especially
not
if some,
planning.
because
Go
not
ahead.
all restaurants are like breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
That's
Some
true.
restaurants are only lunch. Or some
Yeah,
breakfast.
that's very true. If your specialty, one of my favorite places to get brunch, they're open from 7 a.m. to 2. Like they don't
Yeah.
do dinner. So
Yeah.
yeah, if they were open less,
So getting longer hours wouldn't really help.
no,
Mhm. Yeah,
and being open less days, that's going to cut their revenue huge.
exactly. Yeah.
So this is probably, I think, I think it was the gentleman from University of Texas, the one that had the mustache thing that was talking in the video. I think he made some good points of there might be some companies this works, but there's definitely industries or companies where this wouldn't work. Think about retail. If the grocery store is only open 4 days a week, that's a problem. You know what I mean? Like you kind of need accessibility. So there's certain industries I don't know that you could do that, but maybe you could have the employees working in the grocery store just work longer hours, less days. You know what I mean? So maybe some people work 4, some people work 3 or something like that. So maybe there's a way you can employ people, but just doing the shifts differently. Yeah, food service industry, I think it's a problem for sure. Customer service industries, I think that could be a problem potentially. Any other industries that we didn't mention maybe where you think that's not going to work? For sure, like can't do it. Restaurant industry, probably nightclubs, the casinos, which is huge in our town. I mean, a big part of our economy is the casinos, the gambling, the clubs, the restaurants, the shows. Did everybody fall asleep on me?
I'm just thinking.
Mhm.
I'm just thinking. I
Yeah.
don't know.
This is a great example of there might be a general concept that it works, but there's definitely going to be limitations. You know, there's definitely going to be.
Yeah. I think that there's probably a lot of industries where it wouldn't work.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe those industries aren't as like large, so
Mm-hmm.
it wouldn't make that much of a difference. But
Right.
it's still a difference to that industry.
Okay. So let's make it personal for a second. School. Do you think, let's say we went Monday through Thursday, but let's say we had to keep the same number of hours because there's actually a number of days and hours that we have to meet for federal requirements to get funding.
Yeah.
Would you prefer, so right now, let's see, we go to school from, let's do the math. We go to school from 8 to 3. So that's 4, 5, 6, 7 hours a day, 7 times 5. So we go to school 35 hours a week. Okay. So if we took away a day, that would be -8. So it'd be 20. So we'd have to make up 8 hours. So we'd have to go an extra 2 hours a day. So instead of 7 hours, we'd have to go 9 hours. So let's say we'd have to go 8 to roughly 5-ish.
So when I went to school in Montana,
Uh-huh.
where I was from, they actually did Monday through Thursday.
Okay. What were your hours?
It was from 7 to 3.
Okay.
And then to make up for some hours lost, or like if there was holidays or something like that,
Mhm.
at the beginning of every month, you'd have a full week of school. It would be Monday through Friday.
Oh, so do like a Friday that week.
Yeah.
They would do a Friday to
Um,
make up, especially if you had like a snow day or weather day
Yeah,
or something
exactly,
like
yeah.
that, right?
Yes,
Those
they
unplanned.
always do that, yeah.
Okay,
Um,
interesting. Did you like it? Did you find the learning environment was better? I mean, obviously things would be different in Montana anyways, but in that aspect.
I don't know. For me, it was kind of like it just kind of got really long, you know. But also, it kind of worked because most parents are getting off around that time. So if their
Mhm.
kids needed to get picked up, they could
Mhm.
pick them up. Versus if they got out of school earlier, their kids would have to wait
Mm-hmm.
or take the bus or something.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah. No, that's true.
I prefer the shorter school days and just having more days. Just
Okay.
because there's a lot of stuff that I like to do like afterwards, and I would have so much more time after school versus now like we're getting out at 3, and so that means if I want to go to bed at 10, I only have 7 hours to do stuff.
Right. Well, and what's interesting, our high school is the exception, right? With times, the rest of the brick and mortar schools, they go at 7 and they're out by 1:11.
Yeah. See, I like that because
I would too. I'll be honest. I'm an early riser, so getting off at 1, I'd be like, yeah. It's nice. Let's hear from some other people. What do you guys think? What do you guys think about the school day? Would you like to keep the 5-day, but maybe just move it up, do 7 to 1? Do you like what it is now? Or would you like the idea of a 4-day week just going longer? Unmute, respond in the chat, and then I'm going to let you go. I'll let you work. Come on, folks. I'm just asking for an opinion. Okay, respond or you will get kicked out. This is ridiculous. Respond or you will get kicked out. All right. You don't get attendance for just sitting there or walking away. Well, okay, but put it in the chat. What do you prefer? I'm not asking for a thumbs up. I'm asking for a simple opinion. You're in a speech and debate class. I'm asking for a simple opinion about your school schedule. I'm not asking for rocket science here. Come on. Well, which one? So do you like the idea of the brick and mortar, the 7 to 1 and getting out earlier? Do you like what we're doing? Where we're going, it's more like, I guess it's more like 9 to 3, what you guys are doing. Cause I start at 8, but you guys start at 9. So the 9 to 3, or do you think it would actually be better 4 days a week, just going longer? So when you say the first one, Cielo, you like the brick and mortar, the 7 to 1, or you like the 4-day week? Okay. So you would be willing to go an extra hour, hour and a half. Okay. So you like the early, the 7 to 1. So going 5 days a week, but having those afternoons free, which it is, right? If you're out by 1, I mean, holy cow, you have so much of your day. Yeah. Hard to get up. I know how it is for you teenagers, right? It's really hard to get up. You're half awake. I used to joke that that you weren't really alert until when I was on that schedule in brick and mortar. It wasn't till like second period, like halfway through second period, like 8:15, 8:20. I'm like, oh, look, you're awake. The light bulb went on. Like the lights were on, but nobody was home. You know, the first hour. My first hour was always like a little bit. Yeah, it's hard to wake up, but once you're up. Okay. So are we leaning toward the 5-day, but earlier day? It sounds like the 5-day, but the earlier day. I'll be honest, that was one of the things I didn't like about moving to this job. I didn't like the idea that I was out at 3 every day, when at least before I was out at 2 or at 1. You know, going later for me has been one of the cons of coming online that I didn't like. I mean, there's lots of pros, things I do like about being online, but that has been, I would say, one of the cons that I don't like. And my other, yeah, exactly. For me, it would be like going to the gym or like getting an errand done or something before I have to pick up my kids. All right, cool. So it's interesting. I think it brings a lot of elements of, you know, maybe depends on what industry. Education, maybe not the best idea. You know, food service industry, service industry in general, like restaurants or casino, some of those things where certain hours are going to be so important. So if you're cutting out certain days, that's going to really impact, especially if you're dependent on tips, commission, things like that. There's a variable factor that could really hurt your income. If you're an everyday company, like, of course, now accounting or finance or, something 9 to 5 where it's not constant interaction, it's more data off, you're not customer service, you're just doing the data, the grind projects, things like that, then maybe there is an argument where less hours or less days and just longer hours could be productive, where you're not giving that direct customer service. So that could be really interesting. Okay. And these are interesting things to think about because as you pick careers, think about that. I'll give you one example. My hairdresser who does my hair, she used to do 5 days a week and then she got married, has kids now. So she's gone down to 4 days a week, but she does that. She works longer days. She's like, I just take one extra client. She's like, by taking one extra client a day, she's like, I come in earlier. She's like, I get more time with my kids, but to keep her income the same. So we were having this conversation. And that was actually part of what made me interested in having the conversation with you guys. So she had the ability to make that adjustment, but she had to be careful. Yeah, exactly. To be with her kids more and just the activities and all the things that they need. It saved her a day of childcare as well. But she was also concerned about income, right? Because she was concerned about income because she's a service-based industry, right? So the number of customers and the type of service. So she's like, by just adding one more appointment, by coming in an hour or two earlier, she's like, my income has been pretty much the same, but I've been able to have that 3 days instead of two. So sometimes there's some flexibility depending on the profession or something you choose. Okay. So I'm going to give you, we're going to stay in here till about 3. All right. So what I want you to do is pick a pro or con. So obviously there's pros and cons. There's maybe situations where it would work or it wouldn't work. Pick a side. All right. So you're going to have to pick a side. And there's some more articles. There's some videos you can use that give pros and cons lists. Here's some pro sites. Here's some con sites of that. So pick a side, pick a couple sources that would support your position. Okay. So yes, overall, I think it's better, or no, I think there's too many variables or because of these industries. Okay. So pick a pro or con. What would motivate you? So maybe you say no because you're like, I'm interested in the food service industry, or I'm interested in this industry. So I have to be working these certain hours to make an income, or yes, because I'm interested in this career. So it's actually a good thing for you to think about in your own career path as you are getting closer to graduating and how that might impact you. What career field you might be pursuing? Would it work for your career field or not? Okay. List the source. Is it a video or article? Give some stats or a quote. Remember, no more than a couple lines. All right. I don't want a paragraph. Like, zero in and make the point. Because when you're just giving me a paragraph, it's not really actually showing me that you're zeroing in on like, what's the point? What's the evidence that supports your position? So you're going to do 2 that support your position and then 1 that is counter. So if you are con to the 4-day work week, then give me 1 that shows positives. Here's why we should, or vice versa. You're pro to the 4-day work week, then give me 1 that would show negatives to the 4-day work week. Okay. And then you bring it together. All right. Bring it all together. You can do it for either. You can do it for either. I'm flexible on that. So when you give your position, tell me which it is. So I'm pro for the 4-day school week, longer hours, or I am con to that, or you could do it for work. I'm open. So, because I think both are different arguments. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I'm open to either one. Okay. Questions? And I'll give you some time to work. Okay. All right. Hop on it. I would think you can get this done in class. 40 minutes. That's a bit of time. Okay. Remember with the pro-con sources, you can only use them once. Okay. So if you use one of the pro-con sources or use one of the videos, you're welcome to use it for whichever side of the argument you want, but you can only use it once. You can't reuse it. All right. So making sure that you're using 3 different sources, which I give you like 10 different sources. So there's lots to choose from. Okay, but you're not repeating sources. All right, let me know if you have questions. All right, everybody, we're going to start wrapping things up and stuff. Remember, I let you guys go just 5 minutes early because I have to go and pick up my kids from school. So finishing this up, picking your position, making sure that you give 2 sources that support your position and then 1 support or 1 that shows the counter position, and then summarizing that up, okay? Get that in. It's due Friday. And if you need anything, you can come see me in small group on Friday. Otherwise, I will see you next Tuesday, and we're going to talk about cancel culture. I've got a great poll we're going to do about first freedom of speech. So we'll spend a little bit of time on that. What is cancel culture? Has it gone too far? So we'll spend a little bit more time debating and discussing next week. So please come ready to participate. All right. It definitely makes class better and part of, what we want to do, but you have to participate to do that. So have a wonderful day. Have a great weekend, and I will see you later. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Ku. Thank you, Cielo.